It's a big day today. Today, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, the Fed is going to have a meeting and they're going to talk about rate cuts and QT. And this might be something game-changing. So let's take a look at what previously happened to the altcoin market, to Bitcoin, whenever these things changed. So welcome to the FOMO Factory. Like the video if you like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the bell notification on. Now, to be fair, macro, not my field, but we can take a look at what previously happened and come to a conclusion like, well, you know, whenever the Fed cut rates, when they stop QT, when they start QE, whatever, what happens to certain risk assets? So let's just speculate a little bit on this, because we all know that rate cuts weren't really happening, QT was happening, so we know that they were draining the liquidity out of the market, right? Nobody was able to take loans, it was all expensive, there was not a lot of money, so people don't go risk on. It's very simple. It makes a lot of sense, right? Now, we know that one of these things is already changing, right? The rate cuts are currently happening. So far, we got only one rate cut in 2025. But if you look right here, Polymarket usually pretty accurate with the predictions, and what they say for the Fed decision in October, so today, is basically we get a 25 basis points decrease. All right, so that's kind of what the market expects. That's what is probably also so far already priced in. Now, if we don't get a change or they for some reason increase it, then prepare, shit is gonna dump, right? If they do decrease with more, which is according to Polymarkets just as unlikely, yeah, then the market is probably gonna rip really hard. But this is the most likely outcome and the thing that we should all pay attention to, a 25 basis point decrease. Right now, it's also likely that the Fed is going to do 3 cuts in 2025, 75 basis points. We had one. We are about to get another one. So let's see how far that takes us. But the most interesting thing is that they were now speaking about the fact that they are going to stop QT in the coming months. That's what they said a while back. And now the question is, well, is it going to be today then? Or is that going to be in December? Right, or maybe even later in 2026. We don't know that. Big companies, etc., have been speculating on today. There are people that saying, no, it's going to be a little later. But what does it actually mean, and what could it do to the market if that happens? So let's take a look at that, because I think that this is really interesting what's going on right now. We have seen Bitcoin in a bull market, right? And we have seen altcoins, you know, going into a bull market as well, just as Bitcoin, but not as hard, right? We have the altcoin market right here also going up. But if we take a look at altcoins on their Bitcoin pair, which we call Altseason, that hasn't been happening yet. And now people say like, well, that's because altcoins are dead, it's broken, it's different, it's bad. It's not really the case. If you take a look at the Russell against the S&P, you could make the case that this is not a crypto-related issue. Right, the Russell is basically the altcoin market of the stock market, and the S&P is Bitcoin. You can put it like that. So the low cap shitcoin companies kind of just went down against the S&P, just like altcoins, which is overlaid in green, have been doing against Bitcoin. This is a very, very, very similar looking chart if you overlay it like this, right? So for the people that think like, well, altcoins are going down because whatever, crypto related, I don't know if that's actually the case. This is more a macro related problem because, like I said, if there is no money, if the Fed is pulling liquidity out of the financial system, then who is going to go risk on in this market? People just don't do that. And we just saw that by gold ramping up, right? Gold is a flight to safety. Well, gold was ripping, right? Now, that's actually a pretty good thing because Bitcoin usually has a pretty, you know, delay on what gold is doing. But apart from that, what could happen to the market right now if the Fed is gonna end QT and if it's probably it's basically a given. But if we get another rate cut today, let's take a look at that. My thoughts are the rate cut, we are getting that QT maybe this month, maybe in December. I don't know. Nobody is really sure about that. Who am I to say like, well, it's going to be? I have no clue. I have no clue, right? But let's first talk about the balance sheet. Okay, so if we take a look at the balance sheet is going down, right? The blue line is going down, meaning that the Fed is taking money out of the system. It's quantitative tightening. Right, and the balance sheet is going down. Therefore, it's more expensive to take a loan. There is simply just less liquidity in the system, right? It's more expensive to borrow money at this point. Now, what is interesting is the green, right? That's the total 3 ES/BTC, so that's altcoins on the Bitcoin pair, so Altseason chart. If we overlay that, what we can very simply see is whenever we are in QT, Altseason is not happening, right? When it's QT, like when the balance sheet is going down, altcoins are like, going down against Bitcoin. Now, here, when we started QT, altcoins also went down against Bitcoin. And it seems that this might be a key indicator. And apart from the narrative, right, that it makes sense that why would people go risk on if they don't have the money to go risk on with in the first place, it is also, if we look at these charts, very correlated actually, right? Because you can see right here that whenever QT ended in September 2019, altcoins on their Bitcoin pair bottomed, right? And we had one more wick way later in December 2020, but it was also mostly the recovery of the COVID crash. People were not really sure what was going on. A lot of money was printed. Where is it going? Like, how come? Hey, and Bitcoin is running right now because they printed a lot of money. So why go to altcoins again if Bitcoin is doing well, right? So there was one last flash crash. But overall, if you look at this, the bottom, it was perfectly timed with QT stopping right here. So it looks to me that QT, QE, right, the Fed balance sheet is just a leading indicator on what happens to risk assets. So it's not a given, it's not a certainty, but it is pretty wise, I think, to assume that, hey, if QT ends, yeah, then crypto goes risk on again as well, right? And what you notice, we have been going a little slower lately, and that's also where altcoins, they start to like, they're not in that full ass downtrend anymore, right? They're just going sideways for a year, basically. So there we go. Now you could make the case like, well, yeah, but they went from QT to QE right here, right? And QE, they inject money in the system. It's people, it's really suddenly getting cheap again to take loans. They pump a lot of money into the financial system. It increases all the liquidity. So of course, then altcoins go up. And while that might be the case, we also see right here, there was no QT, there was no QE going on in 2017. And that alt season was arguably a lot bigger than 2021. So of course, easing helps, right? But do we need it? I don't know. All we know that the tightening, that doesn't really help. Right, so if you are now bearish on alts, then you may have missed the news, but they're gonna stop it, right? So, this seems to be one of the biggest indicators out there for it. All right, so that might be a real interesting thing. Now, how does Bitcoin compare to all of this? Well, not really, actually, right? And there is a case to be made for that because, hey, look, we stopped QT right here. What was that for Bitcoin? It wasn't the bottom. It wasn't the top as well. That happened earlier, right? It was just Bitcoin was already in a downtrend and QT stopped and Bitcoin was like, yeah, fuck it. Let me just do what I do. Leave me alone, right? So there's not really something to say about that right there. Now, if you look right here, when QE stopped and when we went into QT, yeah, Bitcoin was already more than halfway its bear market, right? Bitcoin topped way earlier, right? When QE was still going on. So, and here you see it as well, actually, right? We now have QT going on all the time. And yeah, Bitcoin, it doesn't give a crap. Why? Because I think that people don't see Bitcoin as a risk asset, right? Within crypto, it is the flight to safety, actually, right? So Bitcoin is not seen as the risk asset. People have no problem buying Bitcoin. That's fine, right? So QTQE, it doesn't really seem to have a big impact directly on BTC. Now, let's take a look at something else, because what is one of the indicating charts that altcoins are going to start outperforming Bitcoin? That's Ethereum on its Bitcoin pair, as Ethereum is the biggest altcoin. And if money is flowing there, right, it's often, there's money in Bitcoin and we could see it like, wow, it's a big step to get it into altcoins, right? But if it goes from Bitcoin into ETH, then it is already sitting in an altcoin. It's very easy to flow into the rest of the ecosystems. Right? So Ethereum is a real good example. If we, however, take a look at what happened here when QT ended, so if we overlay the balance sheet once again, you can see QT ended right here. And that was, if I remove this line for a second, the exact bottom for Ethereum on its Bitcoin pair. Right here. The exact bottom. Right? The moment QT ended, Ethereum was like, thanks, that was it. Up only from here. That's it. I'm very curious right now because this time, yeah, look. I'm not saying that it's impossible for Ethereum on its Bitcoin pair to make a new low, but it would not be my base case. This looks like a very clear bottom to me. All right, so this time we didn't need QT to end in the first place. So I'm curious, and I'm not even going to speculate on it too much. I'm just curious to see what will happen now to ETH BTC if QT ends. Is it now just not giving a crap anymore? Or is it still going to give a crap? And does it pump way harder from here? I don't know. We'll find out. Then, of course, we have the rate cuts. So, but based on the balance sheet first, it is just looking for alts on the Bitcoin pairs for Altseason. That's a bullish thing. That's a real bullish thing so far. And again, the altcoin market, it's not that old, so we don't have a lot of reference points. But so far, Altseason and the balance sheet are like perfectly correlated. Like that's perfect, basically. Then we have rate cuts. Right, so rate cuts are kind of already happening. So if we do take a look at the rate cuts that are currently happening, here you go. All right, so very simple, blue line down, rate cut. If we overlay Bitcoin first, right, what do we notice? Well, here we go. Logarithmic, please, thank you. What do you see? All right, what I notice is that I lose my line. Here we go. Rate cuts, they are having somewhat of a positive impact, of course, on Bitcoin and the altcoin market, because also rate cuts literally make it cheaper to borrow money. There's just more liquidity. There's more liquidity for people to invest, right? Now, does it have a huge impact on Bitcoin? I don't know. Like, look, Bitcoin is mostly not going up because of retail at this moment, right? Retail still holds, etc. But, do we make a short-term impact on the Bitcoin chart with the current liquidity that they're sitting in Bitcoin right now? I don't know. And I don't think that whales and institutions, ETFs, they give a crap about rate cuts, or not necessarily. It's more maybe for the retailer. But maybe I'm wrong about that. Again, not 100% my field. But what we do see, though, is that the rate cuts, of course, they have a positive impact on Bitcoin. We got the rate cut right here, and that was basically sending Bitcoin full on to the moon in this cycle so far, right? Then we got no rate cuts for like this whole year. And although Bitcoin is still sitting at great levels, it is also kind of sideways for a very long time, right? And what you'll notice is that we got the last rate cut right here, and that was that uptick in Bitcoin again. We're getting another one today, very likely at least, right? That's what everybody is expecting, basically. So would be it would be a shame if we don't get it, but let's assume we do, right? That's just good for Bitcoin. Is that already priced in? Partly, maybe, right? But on the other hand, you cannot price in money that's not there yet. Right, so the money that's actually unlocking, yeah, that's not pricing yet, right? So it's partly maybe unlocked. So rate cuts, fine for Bitcoin. What you also notice here, Bitcoin was already in a bear market, but was definitely not helpful that rates were getting increased like fucking nuts, right? And that kinda, when that stopped going that parabolic, was also the Bitcoin bottom. Right, and you could say the same right here. Rate cuts were going up, although Bitcoin already topped out right here, and Bitcoin was basically having a bull run all the time when rates were getting increased. Right, that was in 2017, 16, 17. Bitcoin was older. It was like maybe less tied to the whole financial system in the first place. Was more retail driven. I don't know, but what you'll notice right here, rates were like, it stopped going up and bear market kind of ended. If we overlay the altcoin market, and again, the altcoin market on the Bitcoin pair, because I don't care how the altcoin market does on the dollar pair, because we can read that from Bitcoin, right? But I want to see what makes it that altcoins outperform Bitcoin, what drives an alt season, right? And again, like I said before, what mostly drives an alt season, in my opinion, is just whales seeing that Bitcoin stalled out, Bitcoin dominance stalled out. They take their money from Bitcoin to put it into altcoins because that's not long profitable anymore. Altcoins pump really hard. Retail sees it, be like, hey, alt season, let me get in. They pump even more. It's the main driver. But, what's going to make that Bitcoin is going to stall out, that the Bitcoin dominance is stalling out? And that makes it altcoins are now outperforming. And what makes it that altcoins are outperforming in the first place is that people go more risk on in the first place. And therefore, we need good macro conditions, right? It's not just like, hey, it's just like there was a line there. So it all gets rejected. Of course, that's psychology behind it, but there's always a narrative, of course, right? If we take a look at Altseason, right, your favorite curse word, and we overlay it with the rate cuts, what you can kind like there are multiple conclusions right here, right? We have rate cuts right here, and that was in a period where altcoins, they lag first a little bit, right? Like people first want confirmation and they went down a little bit, but after that, hey, they went up, right? Here again, we have a cut, and we might not have that effect just yet. But it's pretty interesting to see that we are now getting rate cuts. We are now getting the stop of QT, maybe the start of QE somewhere. We'll find out. Maybe we first have to hit a recession or whatever. Maybe the tariffs were enough. We'll know. But we have the macro narratives there, right? We have the business cycle, which is now showing like, hey, that's been moved to the right. So the whole cycle has been moved to the right probably. So the seasonality is really there. The sentiment is fucking bad. The charts are showing like, okay, alts, right? Time to go. And during all of that, we can see that this green alts on the Bitcoin pair, we have the bottom right here. Look at my cursor to the left. Exactly here and exactly here as well. It is nuts how everything eventually aligns, isn't it? It is nuts. Again, was this the bottom? I think it was, but hey, I can be wrong, right? but there's a good chance that was the bottom for alts on the Bitcoin pair, definitely. And that people are now like, oh, but it's still bad. Yeah, it's because it's boring, but it's not going down at this moment, at least, right? Maybe down a little bit one day and up a little bit the other day. Overall, it's kind of sideways for now. Yeah, and that's because we had no real rate cuts, right? We had QT all the time. Like, there was nothing that said, like, let's go risk on yet. And that's great because that's the time to prepare. Therefore, I've been bullish on alts on the Bitcoin pair. Because you can see by last cycle, right here, it can go up like that, right? And where are you going to DCA then? I rather DCA this area than this area. But that's up to you, right? Like, that you should do whatever you want, of course. Right? But when it comes to rate cuts, again, it overall helps drive liquidity into the market, but it's not necessarily tied to Altseason or not, right? You can better maybe even overlay the total crypto market to come to a conclusion how that's doing, right? Because that's eventually the liquidity that there is, and I think that that's telling a little bit more. But, you know, it's... let me get it on a regular or on a logarithmic scale right here, right? So at this point, you know, or let me put it like that, it's kind of the same as Bitcoin. Rates were going up, and it kind of stalled out, and that's where the total crypto market just started to go up, and now the rates are slowly going down, but like slowly, like they're not gonna bring it back to like 2 or anything, like, right? We maybe get 50 basis points for the rest of this year. Yeah. Hey, it's better than increasing rates, right? So that's so far what happened. So, you know, would it be good or bad or whatever if they're gonna stop QT? Well, I, again, didn't see where it was a bad thing, right? Bitcoin doesn't really seem to give a crap about all of it. And altcoins plus Ethereum, yeah, stop QT, that marked the bottom, right? And these charts are like basically 100% correlated. So stop of QT, in my opinion, could only be really good. But yeah, it's also, I don't think it's really priced in. And that's the cool thing about this. We get opportunity combined with confirmation again, right? Like we have the confirmation that things are going to go, start to look a lot better. But we still have the opportunity because whenever the Fed announced that they are likely going to stop QT, that was like, when was that, man? I don't know, 4 weeks ago, something like that. I'm not completely sure, but it's not that this chart shot up as a buy the rumor, right? Nothing. And that's a real good thing, actually, because it shows like, let's first do it, right? And then there is money, then there's liquidity that's being added to the market, and then that money can go there. So, in my opinion, stop of QT, it could only be helpful, of course. Rate cuts, of course, it could only be helpful. And we are now in that environment. And that's just really bullish to me. So we'll find out later today how this is all going to play out. Again, alts going down on the Bitcoin pair. I know a lot of people are saying they're blaming alts or whatever, right? Like, it's a bad altcoin market, it's all scam, yada, yada. I think, like, again, look at the Russell against the S&P. It's the same fucking chart, right? It's just not a risk-on environment yet. And what creates a risk-on environment? The things that we just discussed of the Fed, which is currently in that pivot. So, yeah, when it comes to that, things are looking really good. And another macro thing, if you look at the business cycle, right? If you use TradingView, USMNO is the ticker. And this is something that you really want to take a look at. This is the ISM manufacturing new orders. This is just such a freaking interesting chart because this is the business cycle. And again, we know crypto is driven by liquidity. Liquidity, business cycle. It, like, if you want to have one macro chart that you, in my opinion, should look at to come to conclusions like, okay, where are we? Are we in top area? Are we not in top area? Then this is the one, right? You could also say like, well, no, I just look at the calendar and it's November. So, but I think that there's a little more than that, because you know why maybe people stick to the 4-year cycle so much. I can tell you here, it was December 2013. That's where Bitcoin topped out, but it's also where the business cycle was sitting at the highs, right? Here in 2017, right, where Bitcoin topped out for your cycle, right? Well, or is it because this topped out right there? Okay, but then we have 2021. That's 3 times. Could not be a coincidence. Well, it's kind of where the business cycle topped out, right? Again. And what's interesting is that we had that first peak of Bitcoin in March, April, right? 2021. Probably because that's simply where the business cycle topped out. But it may have been back then a self-fulfilling prophecy that people said like, well, it's maybe not the top because it's not 3 years yet. So people kind of pumped their own bags up again for one last time up to December or November before we really went into a bear market, right? While the ISM was already topped out there. And therefore, if people say like, well, it's a 4-year cycle and it happened 3 times, so it should happen again, then this chart is even more accurate, right? Because although this marked the tops perfectly, it also has a lot more history than Bitcoin. And although it spikes up and down and all over the place, overall, this is like, if you ever ask like, hey, show me an oscillator. What is an oscillator? Here you go, right? So it is pretty clear that the ISM, the business cycle, is a way more accurate theory than the 4 years crypto cycle, right? So, and that's the only reason why people say that it topped out now, or that it will top out now, because 4-year cycle. Yeah, these people haven't looked maybe at things that make a 4-year cycle a 4-year cycle, right? And if you look at that, then you can say like, well, it's now sitting at the lows, right? So if crypto tops out this quarter while this is sitting low, then this time is different, right? And it's weird because if this thing shoots up somewhere here and I don't know, maybe it goes up to, let's say, I don't know, May 2026, right? And then crypto tops out there as well. People will say, whoa, this time was different. Oh, no, it wasn't. Crypto topped out once again when the business cycle topped out, right? Keep that in mind. So with everything that we just discussed about the balance sheet and the rate cuts, people might always say like, well, there's no time. There's no time. Why is there no time? Why? Because it's November? Is it astrology or is it liquidity? What do you think, honestly? Right? This thing has a long way to go up. And when these numbers come out, I think it was projected that this will go to around 51, something like that. It's already a lot better. It's already better. But actually, when the ISM sitting above 60, that's where shit goes nuts, right? And the last time we were sitting above 60 was in the last bull market. We haven't even arguably been in a bull market yet, right? So keep that in mind. I think that this is something that people just don't look at for some reason. But it is very easy to say like Bitcoin again, 2013, 17, 21. So it is going to be 25. Why? Because Bitcoin looks at a calendar? Or because something happened that made it top out these times, which is this, right? And in that case, yeah, the video is taking a different direction. But I think, again, that the people are trying to say like, well, no, 4-year cycle's over, no alt season. Yeah, these people are going to get wrecked because they never looked at the chart that actually matters. And this might be the one chart that matters for maybe 80% of all of this. So macro-wise, it is looking fucking bullish, right? I mean, apart from all of that, S&P sitting at all-time highs at the moment, right? Gold had an insane run. That liquidity from gold to Bitcoin is easier transferable than ever. And again, also, if you take a look at gold on its Bitcoin pair, look, it ran up. Bitcoin or gold outperformed Bitcoin for a little while again. Kind of made a double top like perfectly right here, right? And you see what happened after that. Bam, bam, bam. Down it went. Macro looks fantastic. And I think that we should look at that because it's all 100% liquidity game. Crypto, Bitcoin, it's all liquidity driven. Right? It's not just like, oh, it's this month, so now money comes in. It's that month, so now money goes out. Doesn't make fucking sense to me. Right? So overall, we can speculate all we want, but maybe it's a matter of not really overcomplicating it and just say like, yo, things are looking really bullish at the moment. So I'm gonna wrap it up right here, guys. I'm excited. We'll find out what's gonna happen again. QT stopping today or not? I don't know. Maybe December. I can't really put my finger on it. Not sure. Right? But all I know is that if it stops today, great. We have a good macro reason for shit to go up. However, if it doesn't stop today, good. You have a good reason to DCA for at least 2 more months because you know eventually it will go up. And all in all, we can't lose like that, right? So thanks for watching. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the bell notification on, and I'll see you in the next one.